Hello, everyone. Welcome to our last KFF webinar of this term for evaluating and continuing your Kiwanis Family Relations. We're going to get started in a couple minutes. Thanks to all of you who showed up and are already here chilling. Take some time, take a breath. We'll get started in a couple minutes. And thank you so much for coming, and we'll let you know when we get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. Welcome to our Evaluating and Continuing Your Kiwanis Family Relations webinar hosted by the District Kiwanis Family Foundation Committee. This is our last webinar for the 2016-2017 term, and we thank you for making the time out of your busy schedules to come out and just learn more about how you can finish off this term on a high note with your Kiwanis Family Relations and prepare for the term ahead. This webinar is chock full of information that will be super helpful to you, whether you're a current officer, an incoming officer, or even just a general member. Things that you can think about as you work towards improving your Kiwanis family relations for the next term. So before we start, a couple quick things. First, we need you all to sign in. So our sign-in link is the same as usual at http://www.tinyurl.com/KFF webinar sign in. Please, 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 please sign in, or else you will not get credit for today's webinar. Considering that this is the second to last day for MRP, if you're trying to get that webinar credit to hopefully reach the next standing or just get the credit in general, please, please, please sign in. And then secondly, we have our questions form that you can submit questions at. So if you have any questions during the webinar about anything that we talked about, please go to tinyurl.com/KFF webinars questions. So plural webinars and plural questions. So, and then we will answer those questions that we receive during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So let's get started with introducing our hosts.
Hello, everyone. My name is Josef Madrigal, and I am a fourth year at UCLA and a graduating senior. I currently serve as your 2016 to 2017 Kiwanis Family and Foundation Chair, and in the past, I have also held the positions of Metro Lieutenant Governor, as well as UCLA's Kiwanis Family Youth Chair, meaning that I mostly worked with Key Club, Builders Club, and K-Kids. And my favorite Kiwanis Family My favorite Kiwanis Family Chair experience was Key to College 2014 and Key to College 2015, because it was just a really great feeling for me to finally host that event and see all of the hard work that I put in over the summer come into fruition. So yeah.
And hello, everyone. My name is Nick Stringfellow. I'm a third year, and I also go to UCLA. I am not graduating because I still have another year to go. Yay me. So passing current positions, I currently serve on the District KFF Committee as the Workshops and Webinars Coordinator, and I also serve as the Committee Chairperson for the International Kiwanis Family Relations Committee. And in the past, last year, I've served as UCLA's Kiwanis Family Networking Chair. So while Joseph did work with the younger branches as Kiwanis Family Youth Chair, I worked with Kiwanis and other Circle K clubs, and even a bit with Action Club during my term in my position. And then my favorite Kiwanis Family Chair experience would have to be hosting brand new events between UCLA, Circle K, and our sponsoring Kiwanis clubs, Santa Monica Kiwanis. We were able to continue some of the programs like Dinner with Kiwanians, which is cool to eat with our Kiwanians, and also introduce new events that got Kiwanians coming to UCLA and having more members interact with them. So we're just going to jump right into our webinar topics. So let's break down what we're going to be talking about today before we get started. So first thing we're going to talk about is the importance of evaluation. Why is evaluation important? Why is it necessary for you to do this as you prepare for the next term? We will cover all those things for this first point. The next point is, how do I actually evaluate my Kiwanis family relations? We have a couple of strategies for you that we'll be talking about during the webinar to help break down the evaluation process. So that way you can feel a lot stronger about your evaluation, be really efficient, and have something really, really powerful. So that way you can use what you're doing this term to prepare for your successors and for this next term. Next is actually preparing your incoming officers to work with the Kiwanis family. So this goes with usual transition things, but also just informing and talking about other things that will help your Kiwanis family chairs and also your other officers be more comfortable working with the Kiwanis family for the beginning of the next term and beyond. Next is transitioning and your Kiwanis family counterparts. So working with your Kiwanis family counterparts during your transitions from one term to the next. The Kiwanis family terms don't always intersect. Usually the only term that intersects with ours is Key Club. So that it's important to note that we don't all transition at the same time. So that's an important thing to realize as you transition and as you work with your counterparts. And then lastly, just general tips that we will talk about to ensure that you have a smooth transition from the 2016-2017 term to the 2018 term, excuse me.
So the first thing that I want to talk about is the importance of evaluation. So many of you are probably sitting on your computer screens right now wondering to yourself, why are we having a whole workshop dedicated to evaluating our Kiwanis family relations? So that's where this slide comes in. So there's really 3 levels of the importance of evaluation that I want to go over. And the first one is the importance of evaluation to you. So evaluating yourself is important because it really allows you to see what accomplishments you have made in this previous year. It allows you to go back and see the highlights of what you've done, as well as help you kind of see what you could have done better. And from that, you can grow in the next year. So that's really how you can continue to improve yourself, is by continuously evaluating yourself, not only at the end of the year, but also as you keep on going through different phases. And really, this doesn't just apply to Circle K. So for example, right now we're talking about evaluating your Kiwanis family relations. What you learn from evaluating what you did as a Kiwanis family chair, or just as a general member, or as a board member, what you've done and how you evaluate that can factor into what you do in the future outside of Circle K, as well as maybe other positions that you have within our organization. The next level of why evaluating yourself is important is evaluating yourself is important for your successor. So many of us have been in the position where we were new to our positions, not necessarily just being a Kiwanis family chair, but other board positions that we may have stepped into. And a lot of us remember the feeling of kind of being lost and confused. And a lot of us had a lot of support from our predecessors. And so really, by evaluating what we've done in the previous year, it will allow us to give our successors better tips and advice on what pitfalls to avoid, as well as what they can use from your term in order to continue growing. So evaluation is really important to get your successor, to give your successor kind of a running start into the next term. And then finally, evaluation is really important in Circle K. So as Circle K, our goal is not to stay stagnant. We don't want to enter a cycle in which we just continue performing at the same level that we do every single year. In Circle K, what we want to do is we want to continually develop and build upon what we've done in previous years. And really, the only way you can do this is to evaluate what you've done in the past year. So by evaluating, you can see what new programs you can have, what things you can do with existing programs that you may not have considered before. And through this whole process of evaluating, you make not only yourself better, but also the organization of Circle K a whole lot better for it. And so the next thing that I would want to discuss is really, how do we even start on evaluating our Kiwanis family relations? So there's various methods, and really it's how you think it's best. So what you think would be best in evaluating your circle or your Kiwanis family relations. But in this webinar, we are going to talk about evaluating our Kiwanis family relations in terms of this CIRCLE acronym that me and my committee presented to you all at our Kiwanis Family 201 webinar and workshop. So again, just to recap, the CIRCLE acronym stands for communication, innovation, reevaluation, collaboration, legacy, and education. And this was kind of a plan that me and my committee created for clubs to find ways to better improve their Kiwanis family relations. And during this webinar, we are going to give you kind of a brief overview on how you can evaluate your Kiwanis family relations based on the CIRCLE acronym and what questions you can ask yourself so that you can have a better foundation for the upcoming term.
So first, to start our CIRCLE acronym discussion for evaluation, we're going to talk about communication. Communication is super critical in order to properly work with your Kiwanis family counterparts make new connections, and make sure that your relationship is going strong and that everyone's on the same page. So communication, I feel, is one of the most important things to keep in mind when you work with your Kiwanis family counterparts, and it can make your term with the Kiwanis family even better than maybe you can do with lower levels of communication. So first question to ask yourself, how do you communicate with your Kiwanis family counterparts? Now the question of how can come in many different forms. You can talk about what medium you use. Like how do you actually communicate with them? Do you talk through email? Do you message them on Facebook, which is really rare? Do you call them, talk to them in person, things like that? But also what you talk about. What things do you communicate with your Kiwanis family counterparts? Do you talk to them only about events? Do you only talk to them like only when you need something? Do you talk to them for specific things, but maybe not all the time? Thinking about that and thinking about what you talk about with your Kiwanis family counterparts may be a point of evaluation that you may not have thought about, and maybe something that you could kind of think about and work on for the next term. Next, how often do you communicate with them? Like I said, do you communicate them every so often when you need something? Do you send them regular updates? Do you only talk to them when you have big events coming up and need support? Or you only talk to them when they have big events and when they need support? Really, it varies depending on the clubs that you work with, and it varies depending on the level of activity that you have with your Kiwanis family counterparts. But it's kind of cool to think about, what times do I contact them? And maybe you can see if you can make that more regular or keep doing what you're doing, depending on the needs that you have for your club. Next, do you know what your Kiwanis family counterparts are doing? Do you know what events they're hosting, what programs they're hosting, like what they're fundraising for, what they're doing in their communities? Knowing that can really help open your eyes to the things that they do and the things that they want to work on. And that could also help you as a Kiwanis family chair as you keep working with them for the next term. But also this can be extended to your general membership. Do your members know what your Kiwanis family counterparts are doing? As an officer working with the Kiwanis family, oftentimes you get a lot of information, but sometimes not all that information may get presented to members. Maybe you could educate your members more. Maybe you could invite them to more events and so on and so forth. Again, this depends on your needs and depending on things that are going on and things that we'll talk about a little bit later in this webinar, kind of things of how you can get more things across about your Kiwanis family counterparts. And then lastly, for the communication section, do your Kiwanis family counterparts know what you are doing, know what your Circle K club is doing? Because this communication, like all communication, goes two ways. It's important for them to know what you're doing and also important for you to know what they're doing. So do the people that you talk with your Kiwanis family know about what you're doing, know about how you're involved with them? And also, do their members know what you're doing also, which is an important thing to keep in mind, because with more awareness of Circle K and the Kiwanis family, and both within Circle K with other branches and other branches of Circle K, you can often build the relationship that you have with your counterparts by becoming more aware and learning more ways that you can work together to serve each other. And next is innovation. So how can we evaluate the innovation happening with our Kiwanis family relations? First thing to think about, what new projects have we implemented this last term? Different clubs have different projects that they host. Did you host something new for the first time? Do these new ideas succeed? If great, if yes, great, perfect. And how did they succeed? What did you do to make them succeed? But also, if they failed, why did they fail? It's important to kind of think about evaluation, not just when things go wrong, but also when things go right. So thinking about really everything that you've done throughout this term. Maybe for some of the projects you wanted to start, maybe you just couldn't get things out in time. Maybe some of the ideas you had just didn't come to fruition. And it's important to think about those things as you work towards your evaluation. Next, what are some ways that we can expand on current programs? So different clubs have different programs in their club. And for example, this question could be applied to Key to College. So say that with Key to College, you say you have a lot of workshops and you feel good about your program. Like, oh, maybe you could add a fellowship aspect. Maybe you could have teams and have team captains. Like I know UC Riverside Circle K does this. Maybe I can bring this to my own club, et cetera, et cetera. And what is the purpose of these changes that you want to make? Every change should have a purpose. It shouldn't just change it just to change it. But also remember that stagnation. At Circle K, like Joseph said earlier, we try our best to be dynamic and to adapt to changes and always look for better ways to serve our membership. So if you're making changes, think about the way that members are impacted and how that can improve their member experience by working on how you innovate your Kiwanis family programs. And then lastly, what ideas were created but not enacted? So sometimes we have a lot of ideas during our terms that maybe doesn't always result in an actual event or an actual program. And that's okay. Every term has its ups and downs, and every term has things that happen, things that doesn't happen. And that's perfectly normal. But it's important to think about the things that didn't happen. So maybe you can use that as a point for your successor, or whoever your successor may be, to take what you've learned, maybe take some of the things that went wrong, or maybe things that just didn't happen, maybe try them in their own term, or see that how they can adapt the things that you tried to do for the term ahead.
So the next thing to think about are questions that we can ask when we are reevaluating. So again, this whole webinar is based off of evaluation. And next we are going to move on into the reevaluation point of the acronym. So the first question that you want to ask yourself is, have we improved in previous years? So again, really the goal we have in Circle K is to continuously make our organization better and not just settle for keeping the same level of work that we do every single year. And so when you're doing this, when you're evaluating your Kiwanis Family Relations, you have many resources that are available to you. You have previous MRFs, this year's MRF, as well as your many levels of predecessors that are available to help you out. And really you have to look at these resources and really ask yourself whether or not we are improving. And you have to be honest with yourself and think about, sorry, I just lost my train of thought, but when you evaluate what you've done in previous years and see if you're improving, you really have to be detailed about it. You can't just look at the surface. You have to find out where you improved in specifically, as well as where you may have been lacking in specifically. So let's say that you are looking at Kiwanis Family Relations. If you're looking at Kiwanis Family Relations, you can't just say, oh, all of our Kiwanis Family Relations improved, or oh, all of our Kiwanis Family Relations took a step back this year. What you have to do is kind of dissect the topic. So for example, you can say, oh, in terms of our relationships with our Kiwanis sponsors, we improved, but maybe in terms of our relations with other Circle K clubs, we took a step back. And this will really allow you to target what you need to focus on and what you can just keep on doing for the next year. The next question you have to ask yourself is, are we accomplishing goals? So many of us set goals for ourselves when we first stepped into office. And during these last few weeks of the Circle K term, it's a perfect time to go back and open those goals and see what we were able to accomplish and what we were not able to accomplish. If you've accomplished most of your goals, great, that's good for you. But like most of us actually don't accomplish all of the goals that we set in the beginning of the year. I know I haven't accomplished all of the goals I wanted to do in this position. And really, this is the time to go back and ask yourself why these goals weren't accomplished. So if these goals weren't accomplished because of something that you could have prevented, then maybe that is something that you want to advise your successor to look out for. Just kind of like tell them what happened and what they can do so that they don't make the same mistake that you did. But if it's a goal that you weren't able to accomplish because of a reason that's outside of your position, then you can give them advice on how to avoid getting into that pitfall. And then the last question that you need to ask is really, what should we keep for next year, and what new things we should look forward into doing for the next term. The next set of questions that I want to talk about are these questions centering around collaboration. And by collaboration, I mean your work with the different branches of the Kiwanis family. And so for this one, the first question you really have to ask yourself is, what were the branches that we worked with during this year? So as you all know, the Kiwanis family is composed of many different branches, and you can ask yourself which ones you work with and which ones you may be able to look forward to working to in the future. A lot of Circle K clubs don't work with all other branches of the Kiwanis family. So for next year, you can ask yourself what new Kiwanis family branches we can work with for the upcoming year. So for example, when I was stepping in as KFM chair for UCLA 2 years ago, my club never had worked with a builders club before. And so there weren't any builders club that were in our local area. So I decided to charter one. So you need to ask yourself what you are willing to do to work with other Kiwanis family branches during this time, and also how you can go about connecting with all of these other Kiwanis family branches. The second part of the collaboration point, the second question that you need to ask is really, to what extent did we collaborate? There are many different levels of collaboration that you can do with the Kiwanis family branches. You can just attend their events, but really that's not what we're promoting. We're promoting clubs to take a step further and actually actively collaborate with their Kiwanis family branches. So not just attending each other's events, but planning events together, and even like making new events as different branches of the Kiwanis family. So when you are evaluating how you collaborated this past year, you want to ask yourself, what kind of events were we planning with our Kiwanis family branches, and what can we do in order to make sure that we're not just attending each other's events, but we are creating an active conversation in which we as two branches of the Kiwanis family are working together to produce a certain event. And then just a few last questions with collaboration. You need to ask yourself, what were the shortcomings of our collaborations? Again, this kind of ties into the whole how active were both parties when they were collaborating with the event. And then the last question is, how can we collaborate more completely with our Kiwanis family counterparts? And again, that deals with everyone having an active role in actually planning and making the event happen, rather than the Kiwanis family branches just going on to attending each other's events and not being involved in anything besides that.
So our next point, when talking about evaluating our Kiwanis family relations, is talking about legacy. So legacy refers to the long-term impact and long-term programs that your club may be working on, and thinking about things in the long term can definitely help as you evaluate and prepare for the next term. So first thing, what ideas have we done this term from previous years? So what programs have we continued this year? A lot of the times programs we continue are beneficial for our members, and that's great. And those are things that we promote. If you have programs that are working, great. And do they work this year? It's important to think of how they work each year by year, because every year the membership changes, and every year like things about the event changes. So looking back at that, were there things that specifically, sorry, I'll go with words, specifically didn't work? Were there things that worked really well compared to previous years? And by taking that into account, you can kind of get that prepared for your successor if they could decide to continue the programs that you continued during your term. Next, what changes have we made to those ideas? Do we make any adjustments to adjust for our membership? Do we make any adjustments to bring new ideas into the programs? And what were the effects of these changes? So say, going back to the Key to College example, yeah, I brought a fellowship aspect into my Key to College by putting all of the people into teams, and they had a really fun time, and they were more engaged at all the workshops. So obviously that's a positive change. That's something to keep in mind, thinking of the long-term scale and long-term impact of Key to College. But of course, there are things that may happen that maybe they didn't work so well, and things that have to be adjusted from this year to the next. And lastly, what ideas do you want to be continued in the next term? Are there programs that you feel should be continued? Did you create a new program that you feel should be continued? It varies depending on the needs of the club, like I said, because membership changes every year. And there are so many factors that come into how an event runs. And it's important to kind of think about that. thinking about the things that, oh, like, I think this is really good, but maybe we should take a different direction with this event, or like, oh, like, this thing didn't work well, maybe we should take a new direction, or maybe we should do this to make the event better, or maybe like, oh, hey, like, we hosted this new event this year, I think everyone had a great time, and we had a lot of impact on our members, and we should continue this for the next term too, and the terms afterwards. So thinking of the long-term effects of your programs and the long-term benefits that it can provide for your members, and just thinking of things just beyond the scope of one term can be helpful, especially as a new term starts, because like, although things may be going on in the long term, maybe things have been continuing for a long time, there are always ways and possible reasons for things to change. And that's an important thing to recognize, that you don't have to do the same thing that's been done every year. And also for the continuing things into the next term, how are you preparing your successor to carry these on? So for example, when I was helping my successor prepare for her term, I kind of broke down the programs. I helped to make a document that kind of detailed some of the different programs I hosted during my term, and things that went well and things that didn't, as like a guide to some of the programs. I didn't write things for all of them, but I definitely could have. And it comes, for this section, it can really come down to just talking with your successor, creating resources for them, and really whatever works to help your successor kind of have the support they need to continue the programs that you want to have continued. And then lastly, for our acronym is education. So for education about the Kiwanis family is super important, and the way we educate about the Kiwanis family can really make an impact on how many members participate and how many members have a strong love for the Kiwanis family that develops. So first, how often do we provide opportunities to educate our members about the Kiwanis family? So really, education is very cool in that it can be integrated to a lot of different situations and can be presented in a lot of different forms. So this question really talks about the frequency of your education. So did you educate members only when events came up? Did you educate them by hosting separate events for education? Did you like send them resources or make cute little informational videos about them? Really, how you educate your members is important, and how often you do them is important. And sometimes education can maybe put under the wayside by just focusing on the events, but every opportunity can be an educational opportunity. Next, how do we educate members about the Kiwanis family? So how did you actually present the information? So this varies from like hosting, maybe if you have committee meetings in your club, you host a committee meeting where you talk about education. I know for Kiwanis Family Month, when I was a KFAM chair, my co and I worked together to create an educational spotlights during Kiwanis Family Month, which really helps open the eyes of a lot of members to see more about what the Kiwanis family actually is and what it does. And like education can be presented in many forms, but also you want to think of ways so that way education is the top priority of the way you present it. Next, do members know about our club's counterparts and who they are? So this goes hand in hand a lot with awareness. So awareness of the Kiwanis family is often, or it can be not optimal when working with the Kiwanis family and getting members out to Kiwanis family events. So by educating your members about your counterparts and like making them aware to your general membership, you can hopefully get more people involved in going to events. And it's a good thing to think about as you kind of evaluate the education portion, like member awareness of the Kiwanis family. And then lastly, how can we incorporate more or better education to our members? How can we improve the education that we currently provide? Maybe we can have more educational opportunities. Maybe we can have a new event or find a different way to present the information. Whatever your decision may be, or things that maybe you will evaluate over this term and prepare your successor with, education is something that I think is very, very crucial to help having a successful term. And hopefully by evaluating your education and also evaluating all the things that we talked about in this webinar thus far, you can prepare your successors for a great term working with the Kiwanis family.
So the next thing that I want to talk about are the other forms of evaluation. So for the most part, the form of evaluation that we have been discussing is the self-evaluation form. So sitting down and asking yourself these questions and reflecting on what you've done in the previous years. But there are also other forms of evaluation that should also be incorporated into self-evaluation. So the first one is surveying the general membership. So this doesn't necessarily have to be a Google form survey that your members can complete. It can be just sitting down with a member and kind of asking them, hey, what did you think of the Kiwanis Family Relations that we've had this previous year? What could we do better in the next year? And what can we do for you as a general member to help you better understand what the Kiwanis family is and why it is important to interact with them. The second form of other evaluation that you can do is to mediate with the Kiwanis family counterparts. And by this, I mean you can approach the Kiwanis family counterparts and see what they think of our efforts to connect with them. As you know, Kiwanis Family Relations isn't just a one-way street. It should be an active collaboration between your club and another Kiwanis Family branch. And so it's not just about what you and your club needs, but also what the other branch needs as well. So by going to your Kiwanis Family counterparts and asking them what could have been done better, and what your club could have done to make them more understanding of what your club is and what your club does, then you can really kind of shape your Kiwanis Family Relations to be beneficial for both parties. And then the last form of evaluation that you should think of considering is that of comparing with other clubs and organizations. So by this, I mean looking at what other clubs do and seeing what could be applied for you and your club and for you and your community. So at District Convention, we are going to have the District Convention Extravaganza, which will have showcases of different projects that clubs from throughout the CNH district have done. We'll have projects that deal specifically with the Kiwanis Family and Foundation there as well. And by going to stuff like this and just by looking at what clubs around you do, you can see what other clubs have done that have been successful and see how you may be able to apply that to your own club and community. With that being said, however, you should kind of watch yourself when you do this, because yes, it is always good to get ideas from other clubs, but you shouldn't completely compare yourself to that club. So you can't say that, oh, this club does this, why can't we do that as well? You also need to take into consideration the different factors and the different situations that your clubs are in before making these comparisons, because there are just some things that certain clubs can do because of maybe the location, the resources, or even like just a whole list of different factors that are going on for that club that your club may not have. And this can really give certain clubs opportunities that are harder for other clubs to do.
Okay, so next, now that we covered a lot of the evaluation aspects of how you can evaluate your Kiwanis Family Relations, now we're going to talk about how you can apply these things to work with your incoming officers, to work with the Kiwanis family from the Circle K side, and also working with the counterparts during the transition. So first, we're going to talk about the Circle K side and how you can prepare incoming officers to work with the Kiwanis family. Now, the first thing, I think one of the most important things is to educate incoming officers about the different clubs that you work with the Kiwanis family. Knowing about the clubs that you work with, whether you're a Kiwanis family chair or not, is very helpful to kind of have an idea of what things are already happening in the club and how your Kiwanis Family Relations are connected with other clubs that you work with. Next is make officers aware of how your club is connected with your counterparts and know about any dependencies. So the key word here is dependency. So with Kiwanis family clubs, there's often a lot of dependency between your club and your counterparts. So for example, with Kiwanis, a lot of our Circle K clubs do receive support from our sponsoring Kiwanis clubs. Therefore, we are dependent in the way that they may provide funding or provide certain events for our members, or are different things and different support that maybe your Kiwanis advisor gives as well. But also, if you're working with the younger branches and say you co-sponsor a builder club, for example, like UCLA does, there's a dependency in there because although people at the school, the faculty advisor and the officers there, do work with the club. As one of the co-sponsors, you have to work with the club, check in on them, and help run some of their programs. So UCLA does help run some of the service projects that happens during the Builders Club meetings. So that's a kind of important thing to think about. How are we connected, and which ways do we have to work together in order to make sure that overall we're all doing great within our clubs and with the Kiwanis family. And then lastly, for the CKI end, make sure that all officers are educated about the Kiwanis family. Kiwanis Family Relations is a whole Kiwanis family thing. We are all members of the Kiwanis family. Therefore, it's very crucial for all of us to know about the Kiwanis family and how it works and how we can work with them. With the Kiwanis family chair, sometimes it may feel really hard to work with other officers with the Kiwanis family, with Kiwanis family events, because maybe your other officers don't really know much about what the Kiwanis family is doing. And by having all your fellow officers, the Kiwanis family, and what you're doing with them and how your club works with them, you can make sure that they're prepared. So in case there is a chance that they have to work with them, and a lot of the times, a lot of the programs that may be put on by clubs may overlap outside the Kiwanis family chair or working with your K family counterparts, you can be ready and you can feel more confident about working with them. So that way you don't shy away from any opportunities that will be beneficial for both your members and for the members of the club that you're working with. And then from working with the Kiwanis family counterpart end, how do you talk to your counterparts about your transition process, and how does that kind of work? So transitioning with Circle K, since the new term starts in April, a lot of the other terms don't start then. So for example, the Kiwanis International terms runs October 1st to September 30th. And that's not the same as Circle K, since we run April 1st through March 31st. So just kind of knowing how some of these terms don't overlap is important, because as you transition, you can't just kind of disappear from your counterparts. You still have to interact with them, so that way you have that continued relationship, and that you don't have this down period where some of your Kiwanis family relations may be put to the wayside and may not be focused on, and it could be hurt because of that. So before the appointment of new officers, first, you want to let your counterparts know of the election and appointment timelines. So at the end of my term, I made sure that my sponsoring Kiwanis club that I worked with knew that, oh, hey, we are having elections at this time, and an appointed board should be decided by this time, so where I'll have a new person who'll be taking over my position. And they're like, okay, cool, that's good to know. And it helps them kind of realize, like, okay, like you're kind of shifting out as someone new is coming in to take your place. And then also make sure you coordinate a few events that will help your successor get adjusted. So for example, UCLA Circle K often has a successor project where people in the current term help plan a project for the successors, so that way they feel more comfortable. For Kiwanis family programs, last year I did Kiwanis one day because it was still in April, and also that was my successor project when I took office as Kiwanis Family Networking Chair. And that was very helpful for me to kind of understand what it takes to program with the Kiwanis family and learn the different things that go on, so that way I felt more confident when I fully took the reins. And then after appointment, so once your new officers are in your positions and you have the person who will be working with your counterparts in office and ready to go over the next term, first you want to introduce the new chair to your counterparts. Like have you introduce them, but also have themselves introduce themselves as well. So that personal connection is very helpful when you're working with the Kiwanis family, and especially as you get started. Because if you have a strong personal connection or developing personal connection, it's often much easier to work with your counterparts. It's not just some people you talk through a screen, or some people you see like once a month or so. They're people that you can talk with more often, and people that you can have like a connection with that will help you as you program, as you go in your position, and as your counterparts get used to working with new officers. Next, you want to bring your new chair to meetings and events so the counterparts can meet them in person. In-person communication is great. I know when I first got appointed to my position, I made sure that I attended the last Kiwanis club meeting of the previous term. So I was able to meet some of the Kiwanians then, got to say hi after attending a Kiwanis meeting in the past. And it was good to kind of like establish myself as someone who like, okay, like I'll be working with this. I kind of taking that perspective, hey, I'll be working with them. I should know more about what they're doing. And that awareness is very helpful, especially as you get started, and something that will develop throughout the term as well. And then lastly, you want to gradually let the new chair handle communication and planning. So if you're currently in office, your successor will need some time to transition. And we'll be talking about more tips to transition later on. But for now, just kind of think about once they're appointed, You want to make sure that you're not totally doing everything when working with your counterparts, and that your counterparts are kind of having more of a role each and every time, and as the new term begins, and also as the current term ends. That way, by following all these different tips, you can make sure that your Kiwanis Family counterparts are still being taken care of and they're still being focused on without, like, even though there's a transition of office, which sometimes can be kind of funky, you're still in a good place with your Kiwanis Family Relations.
So just a few tips when you are transitioning your successor as well as the future officers of your club. This not only applies to Kiwanis Family Relations, but also just transitioning officers in general. And the first step is to inform, but not to overwhelm. So by this, I mean that you give the right amount of information to your successor. You want to give them basically information enough for them to do your position well, but also not to kind of scare them and discouraging them and kind of just putting them in a box of what they can and can't do. So before you talk to your successor, be sure to kind of like make a list of all of the things that you want to discuss, and some things that you may want to save for later. The second part kind of ties in with the first part, and that is be present even after retirement. So by this, I mean that once you have your one-on-one with your successor, it's not a chance for you to just disappear into a void forever. You always want to make sure that your successor has the ability to contact you whenever he or she needs help on a certain topic. This ties in with the first one because whatever you don't necessarily share during your first one-on-one with your successor, you can always talk about in the future when the time comes. So for example, when I was training my successor in how to plan a key to college, I kind of just gave them a brief overview of what they should be looking for. And then when they were actually going through the planning process, and that's when I was a bit more detailed about what he should be doing. The third point is to help your club and your successors learn from your mistakes. So again, during your evaluation process, you should have come up with a list of pitfalls that you may have fallen into, or a few mistakes that you did that you didn't know was not the proper way to do it. And so when you have this list, you kind of just like hand it over to your successor and say, this is what I did that I shouldn't have done, so now you can learn from my mistakes. And then the last point is really important, and that is support but do not take the reign. So a lot of you may know of the concept of the helicopter parent who's always there just monitoring what his or her child is doing and kind of controlling everything. And this is not what you want to fall into when you are a predecessor. When you end your term and your successor begins his or her term, you really want to give them a chance to define their terms themselves. You want to give them a chance to stand on their own 2 feet and make their own mistakes. Yes, as predecessors, we don't necessarily want them to make mistakes, and yes, we are invested in the position, but we had our turn, and during this time, our predecessors didn't step on our toes, and so in return, we shouldn't step on our successors' toes. We should give them the chance to make their term and define it in their own way. So that concludes most of the main topics, or all of the topics that we will be discussing during this webinar. And here are just a few key takeaways that I want you all to take after sitting through this webinar with us. And the first one is that evaluation is really necessary. for improving Kiwanis family relations because it helps us grow from what we've done in the previous years. The next takeaway is that you could use the Circle K acronym to self-evaluate yourself and ask yourself these questions that will help you improve for the next term. Then there is the point that preparing your officers for the next year is really important in order to ensure strong Kiwanis family relations. And this extends not only to the Kiwanis family chair in general, but all other board positions, as they are also important in building Kiwanis family relations. The next point is that you should work with your Kiwanis family counterparts when you are transitioning the term so that they are also aware of what is going on. And again, this goes back to the whole point that Kiwanis family relations is a two-way street and not just a one-way street. And then the last one is that as current officers that we are in our position right now, it is our responsibility not only to have our successful term as ourselves, but also to assist our successors in having a successful term that is defined by them. So with that being said, that is the meat of the webinar. So now we will be moving on to taking questions from all of you. So Nick?
Yeah, so for this questions portion, we have our form still open. So if you go to tinyurl.com/KFF webinars questions, you can still submit your questions. We have a couple questions already set. Just a reminder, if you're going through the questions form, that does not count as attendance. We have a couple of people who have submitted that form who may not have submitted the attendance form. So the attendance form will be the link will be up again at the end of the webinar on the next slide. But just make sure if you did that input for what is your question not applicable, make sure that you get that fixed, okay? Thank you. So for questions, we're gonna give you guys just a minute to submit any questions that you may have, and then we'll get started answering the things that we have. Cool, take like 30 seconds to a minute, and we'll be good to go.
Okay, so we have our first question, and the question is, what are some ideas y'all have for creating events between Kiwanians and CKI members, especially if there is a large age gap? Or what are some successful events your home club have? Or what are some successful events your home club has done that collaborates with Kiwanians? Okay, so thank you for that question. And so really, you brought up a good point because sometimes there is a large age gap with our Kiwanians. And something that you have to consider is sometimes our Kiwanians don't have the ability to do vigorous service projects that we have. And the solution to that is really just kind of like maybe meeting in the middle, or actually more so catering towards your Kiwanians' needs. So for example, you can still have a service project and do it with your Kiwanians, but it can be a tabletop service project. So you can bring meaningful tabletop service projects to your Kiwanians and be able to bond to them through that. And that's really good because, you know, sometimes when we do vigorous service projects, we may not have a lot of time to talk with our Kiwanians, but if you're just sitting at a table doing a service project, that gives you enough opportunity to kind of take breaks and just discuss different issues with your Kiwanians present. And a successful event that my home club collaborated with Kiwanians on was this program called Dinner with Kiwanians, which is another way to interact with your Kiwanians without having to worry about the age gap. Basically, with Dinner with Kiwanians, we either invite Kiwanians to our dining halls here at UCLA, or sometimes we even get invited to our Kiwanians' homes where they cook us dinner. And during this time, we have an opportunity to meet our Kiwanians on a more personal level, learn more about their careers, their professions, what they did in order to be in the position, what they think of Kiwanis, some life lessons that they learned during the course of their lifetime. And honestly, I feel like this was one of the events where I got to really get to know my sponsoring Kiwanis Club, because everybody has to eat sometime, and eating is a great way to bond with people. So that's one idea.
I also wanted to expand on this question a little bit. Thank you, Joseph. To kind of expand on this, like, yes, there can be an age gap between Kiwanis and Circle K members, but you can definitely use that as an advantage as well. So with older age may come like more experience and more wisdom to impart on our Circle K members. So like keeping that in mind, I kind of thought of a way to help our Kiwanis give advice to us by hosting events with professional development, more specifically Key to Life. So the Key to Life program, which is a program that's relatively new, focuses on using Kiwanis and alumni to like give advice on things that will be helpful for us as college students to help us like as we go through adulting and as we transition into post-grad life and go into our careers and real life. Just scary. It can be scary, but the Kiwanis definitely have a lot of wisdom that they can give. So it's like topics for like workshops and things where just like networking and like how to get it, like looking for jobs and things. It could be like personal things, like skill things, like how to change a tire or like how to cook food. Like those are really fun topics to do too. So really like using like the age difference can be very helpful with like educating your Circle K members and helping develop them too, while doing something that the Kiwanis are down to do to help show what they know, to help like, make a difference for us, people who are younger, the younger generation. And also for other Kiwanis family programs, like programs with Kiwanis, it really varies. Like I think it's good to think of like Kiwanis relations with all three tenets. So things you're doing with service. So I know for UCLA, we do a Kiwanis one-day project with our sponsoring Kiwanis Club. They usually host like a tree planting in Santa Monica. So we go out and do service with them. Not super strenuous, but it was a great opportunity to talk to our Kiwanians. Like Joseph said, tabletop service projects are great too. For leadership, Key to Life is an example, and other programs that help like work with Kiwanians on leadership development and just like developing ourselves as people, whether it's just benefiting us as Circle K members or benefiting Kiwanians as well. And then also with fellowships. So generally, Kiwanians is a great example of a fellowship program with Kiwanis that helps a lot of members kind of learn more about the Kiwanians and kind of put faces to this big group of the Kiwanis family that maybe we don't know so much about. So those are just kind of a couple of tips. Again, it really depends on like the needs of your Kiwanis Club and the needs of your club, like what your Kiwanis Club can actually do. I think it's cool to kind of look at some of the events that the Kiwanis Club currently does and maybe adapt them to your own needs and to your own club, and maybe just like expand on that. Like, oh, you guys are already doing this. Like, I think it'd be cool if we can bring this to our Circle K members, or we can do this and include Circle K too. So those are just a couple ideas for working with Kiwanis. Joseph, for the next question.
Okay, so the next question is, how did you choose which local junior high school was a good fit for a Builders Club? And for me, the process that I underwent was kind of simple. So I received 3 candidate schools from my sponsoring Kiwanis Club. And for them, this was just the clubs that were close to both Santa Monica as well as UCLA. So really the first thing that you should watch out for is location. The second thing that I considered when I was contacting these schools were contacts that we had within these schools. So our Kiwanis Club president at that time was a mother of one of the students. So really, if you have a connection within that school, it would be great. So like, for example, if a Kiwanian was a teacher there or something. And then really the last thing that you should look for when picking a junior high for a Builders Club is the receptivity of that campus to a Builders Club. So I lucked out in that the first school that I contacted really promoted a sense of service in its students. Their students were required to do X amount of service hours per year. So Builders Club was a great answer for students who may not necessarily know where to find service projects. And so because the campus was really into promoting doing service, it was a great opportunity, and it was just a great fit to have a Builders Club there. So Nick, next question.
Okay, so we have another question. So the question is, as a paid member, what are some ways I can be more active with the Kiwanis family? And that's a great question. So you may be like, oh, hey, what can I do with the Kiwanis family? And there are multiple different like resources that you can use in order to kind of find ways to become more active with your counterparts. So I think one of the things that's maybe the easiest is to actually go to the Kiwanis family events. So if your club works with different Kiwanis family counterparts, if you can make it out to a meeting or make it out to a service project or really anything that works with another branch, I think that's a great first step into kind of saying like more about what the Kiwanis family is and actually put faces to the name, which is definitely super helpful. Another resource that you can use are your Kiwanis family chairs and your board members. So if you have Kiwanis family chairs, you can talk to them and just learn more about what they do with the different clubs, and they have lots of information about the clubs that your club works with. And that I found when I was a new member at Circle K, like learning more about the Kiwanis family clubs that we work with. I was able to talk to some of the officers. They're like, oh, hey, like this is what we do with our Kiwanis family. And I thought that was really cool. It was great. Another resource you can use are educational resources for more general knowledge. So if you want to just learn more about the different branches and how they were founded or different projects they do, there are lots of resources from our district, resources from international that you can use to kind of like read up on just the general things about each branch, which can definitely help when you actually interact with them. You could be like, okay, I already know this, like let's do some personal interactions, great. And I think that getting more active, it comes in many different forms. Those are just a couple of the ways that you can get more active with the Kiwanis family, but take a look at the opportunities around you, and hopefully that will provide some avenues for you to get more active. So hopefully that helps. Joseph?
Yeah, I think Nick covered all of it. But for me, just like one thing I want to say is like really just don't to be more active in the Kiwanis family, you just really have to put yourself out there. There's gonna be some situations where you may kind of like shy away. Like for example, when I was starting off building Kiwanis family relations, I was kind of like scared to talk to Kiwanians because again, like I was just coming out of high school, and to me they were I was still used to calling them like Mr. or Miss or Mrs. or something. So really, it's just really about being comfortable. Just my general tip is like, just be comfortable. And yeah, just put yourself out there and you will succeed in building your Kiwanis family relations.
Perfect. So thank you everyone for all your insightful questions. Hopefully we were able to answer some of those and cover a lot of different things in this webinar that you can take with you as you finish off this term, which is ending in just a couple weeks, which is absolutely nuts. And be prepared for the next term to help your clubs and your Kiwanis family counterparts succeed. So that is it for our webinar. Before we do our final wrap-up comments, I'm going to send it over to Joseph to talk about the K Family and District Convention Extravaganza.
Okay, so just one last announcement from me in terms of Kiwanis Family and Foundation. Please do remember that we are having our District Convention Extravaganza at District Convention Saturday night activities. So if you have a Kiwanis Family or Foundation service, membership development and education, or fundraising project or programs that you want to present at the extravaganza, there is a Facebook page with that information. I will also be sending an email probably tomorrow with all of the information about signing up for the extravaganza. And also, if you don't have anything you want to present, I highly encourage you to come to our extravaganza and see what other clubs are doing. And again, this really does go into the whole evaluation thing and seeing what you can do, what other clubs are doing, and what you can bring back to your own community. So with that being said, that's it for extravaganza. I just want to thank you all for coming to our last Kiwanis Family and Foundation webinar for the term. It has been a great 10 webinars with all of you, and hopefully you all learned something more about the Kiwanis Family and Foundation through these webinars. So Again, final reminder for sign in. If you haven't signed in yet, please do so at tinyurl.com/KFF webinar sign in. Again, tinyurl.com/KFF webinar sign in. Please remember that this is the sign in link. So if you sign in through the question form, be sure to sign into this link. So with that being said, Nick, do you have any more announcements?
Just last thing, if you want to get in contact with Joseph or I, or also Helen, who was supposed to be our third host, but unfortunately couldn't make it today, all our email addresses are right there. If you have any questions about anything we talked about in the webinar, we'll be glad to answer any of your questions regarding the content today or just anything about the Kiwanis family. We are your District Kiwanis Family Foundation Committee. We're still here with you throughout the rest of the term. And we hope as a committee that you guys have a wonderful rest of your term. Thank you for all the support for all these kind of webinars. It's been an honor serving all of you as a Workshop Webinars coordinator. And we hope to see all of you at DCON coming up in a couple of weeks. Wow, it's coming up so soon. And have a great night.